Hello and welcome to a very special live edition of Unspoken Conversations with Candace. Season 3 has been dedicated to male survivors. Our host, of course, is Candace Sanchez. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the co host. And our guest this month is Lori Poland, co founder and CEO of EndCAN. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, my website, and we're on both Candace's Facebook and YouTube accounts and my Facebook and YouTube accounts. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to go ahead and bring in our host, Candace Sanchez. Um, she is new to live streaming. So, Candace, thank you for being on this journey with me. For folks who've been watching the show, watching the episodes this year, obviously that this has been a very meaningful journey, and I've learned a lot. But is it safe to say, Candace, and it's fair to say that you've learned a lot as well, at least on the technical side of event production and live streaming?
Yes, Neil. So I just first of all, I just want to say thank you for I'm gonna I told Neil I'm gonna let you drive today. I kind of feel nice to take a little bit of the back seat. Normally I'm running, as the primary and leading the conversation, but being that this is your wheelhouse, live streaming, I wanted you to run with this. And again, just to thank Digimentors for being, a great partner and helping
Thank you.
to get this podcast for season 3 dedicated to male survivors. We have been on this journey since last year, and to know that we are mid-year, almost like wrapping things up, and then really today's focus is to do a lot of the reflection and
Mhm.
then to really talk about the important work that not only I feel I'm doing, but you're doing, but our guest today and what she's doing and how she's leading the movement and the needle to change, to make cultural change happen around child abuse and neglect. And so I just am so thankful that my paths have crossed with our guest today. And I'm just so grateful and honored to heal, continue to learn and advocate, to educate and hopefully end child abuse and neglect. That is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, just to give folks a sense of what we're going to be doing today, in addition to hearing from Lori Poland, and hearing her story a little bit, we're going to take a look back at a few of our previous episodes, some highlights, and reflect on that with Lori. Some of the themes that we'll be talking about are definitely focus on guilt and on mental health and really forgiveness. And those are things that you'll hear a lot of conversation about. So with that, and with that much of an intro, we want to do our formal intro where we have some acknowledgments and some thank yous, and then Candace and I will be back with you to introduce Lori Poland.
Welcome to Unspoken Conversations with Candace, where we talk openly about taboo topics in order to spark difficult and uncomfortable conversations, where we allow a safe place for anyone who has had trauma to be heard. Unspoken Conversations with Candace is about speaking your truth by using your voice because you matter. Each season on my podcast has its purpose, and for season 3, it is dedicated to all male survivors. I want to express my sincerest gratitude and acknowledge Jeff Chugum. He was curious to learn more about my podcast. Once I explained my vision for season 3, he wanted to help. Thank you, Jeff, for your sponsorship and support. Special thanks to Jesse Daso for assisting in the planning, logistics, and helping to invite guests for season 3. And last but not least, Neil Parekh, my season 3 co host. Neil arranged to have Digimentors produce the show on a pro bono basis. Digimentors is helping me step out of my comfort zone by implementing video production. This form of media stream will be available broadly via our social media and our websites. I am extremely grateful to work with Neil and Digimentors. If you are interested in a high quality virtual or hybrid event, I encourage you to reach out to Digimentors. They work with nonprofits, higher education, corporate partners, international organizations, and others. It does not matter where you are based or how big or small your business is. They also do social and digital consulting, training, workshops, videography, recruitment, and more. Check out the links in the show notes for their contact information. Trigger warning. Before we begin, I want to make you aware that we are going to be talking about some very sensitive issues. All of our guests are male survivors of sexual assault. They will be sharing very personal stories about rape, incest, sexual abuse, and or assault. Please take a moment and make sure you are in an appropriate place to watch and or listen. Some of the descriptions may be explicit and have the potential of bringing up a range of emotions. It is more than okay for you to hit pause and come back to this later if you find that you need to.
So that's the intro that we're used to seeing.
Yes.
Uh, and for folks watching and on the replay, first of all, thank you for watching the replay. But if you're watching live as well, this is a little bit different for what Candace and I have been doing. We've been working together now for a year and a few months. I think April of last year is when we started. And most of our episodes have been pre recorded. The reason we're doing that is that Candace has actually had a podcast for 2 years before she met me. When we talked about doing season three and dedicating it to male survivors of sexual abuse, I suggest, first of all, I thanked her. And then I said, well, why don't we do one better? Why don't we make this a video live stream as well? And so, what I didn't want to do is to completely throw off the work Candace was doing. So, what we've been doing is pre recording each episode, sending the audio version to her team to launch as a podcast, and then launching the video version later at the appointed time. This month we're doing it differently. We're actually launching the video version first, and then we'll share the audio with folks. So for everyone watching replay, or if you're listening to the podcast version, thank you for your support of this season and for all the great work that Candace has done over the last 2 years. Um, so with that, Candace, are you ready to jump into
I am
this
ready to
episode?
do the normal. Yes. So let's go ahead and welcome our guest. I'm so honored and privileged to know this amazing woman. Lori Poland came into my life last year. Let me introduce her first, and then I'm
Sure.
going to tell you how we got connected. So, Lori Poland is a therapist, speaker, and mother of three. She is a CEO. She is CEO and co-founder of the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, which is called EndCAN, END, capital C, capital A, capital N, endcan.org. Lori lives in Colorado and spends her time traveling across the country, speaking on hope, healing, and possibility. And Lori and I connected. Candace puts a lot on her plate. I am what I call the Jill of all trades. By day, I'm a IT professional. I work for a healthcare system. I'm an entrepreneur, so I published my own book in 2020. 6 months later, launched my podcast. So, podcast host, author, do motivational speaking, and I'm also a life coach. On top of that, once I published my book and became, an advocate, I switched the roles. Right, you become. It's a personal responsibility when you truly step into the light, coming out of the darkness, and really speak your truth about a topic that's very taboo. And so, really, with this journey, I saw somebody that was on a mutual Facebook group, Cathy, and she was from Columbus, Ohio, and she was bringing a walk around child abuse and neglect to Columbus, Ohio. And I said, how did you do this? And how do I get involved? And how can I bring this to Milwaukee? Cathy introduced me to Lori, and the rest is history. So, Lori, then her and I met. I met with the EndCAN team. It was like January of last year. And I was welcomed with open arms, and I told them, I want to do this. I was committed, sign me up as a survivor. It just aligned with my personal story. And I just felt like this was the right thing to do. And the city of Milwaukee is a huge city, but I also was born and raised in Racine, and they're not far from each other. So I know I have a lot of community support, family support, friends network, business network. And I thought, if I can get 100 people together to this walk last year, it was going to be successful. And now here I am planning the walk. It's less than a couple weeks away. It's going to be, coming up soon. So again, I was just so happy to have found Lori and the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. And of course, Candace signed up to be a board member. So I am on the board of EndCAN, which it
Absolutely.
just is an honor and privilege to serve with Lori in
Well,
this amazing cause.
so let's introduce our viewers and listeners to Lori Bowen.
Yes. Yay.
Lori,
Hi.
thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's so great to be here. This is a fun combo. It's just like being in backstage. I feel like I'm behind a curtain. So this is really good. I'm
Waiting
so
for the
excited.
big reveal, the big.
Yeah, here I am.
Oh.
No, it's really great to be here. And Candace, every time I see your book cover picture, I'm just like, you can just see the life in you that just radiates. And man, if we could do that and bring that life out of every survivor, man, woman, child, teen, it doesn't matter. Imagine the world that we would have. Like, it's just that picture in and of itself represents our goal.
Yeah.
This
You're going to make
picture
me
is
cry.
incredible.
She's going to make me cry.
True. It's so,
Well-
so beautiful.
But speaking of books, Lori, you have your own book.
I do.
And, Candace gave a little bit of the background in terms of her work with EndCAN and how she met you. But your book is here.
Yep.
I Live Here, Learning to Heal Through Embracing Your Story.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. Yeah. So my story began in 1983. I was a 3-year-old little girl, not quite 37 months. And I was in my front yard playing, and a car drove up and asked if I liked candy. And like any sugar loving 3-year-old, I said yes. And we quickly negotiated, and I got in the car and off we drove. And he took me up to the mountains, and after abusing me, he left me in the pit of an outhouse toilet, about 15 feet below ground. And the hope that he had was that I wouldn't be here to tell this story. And so what fortunately happened was 4 days later, bird watchers happened to be driving by the facility and needed to use the restroom, and they heard me crying. And so they looked around, and eventually they looked down and they saw me, and they said, "What are you doing there?" And I said, "I live here." And for me, that response has always stuck with me, but it's been such a true depiction of what our children embrace as their normal. And so just in 4 short days, I had embraced the concept that I lived in a toilet, and how sad and wrong and everything is that. But then it also gives such a light on what we can do for our children in such a short period of time to give them hope and healing, that if we can adapt to this worst case scenario in this worst environment, imagine what would happen if we gave them a good environment. And the best case scenario, we all just need to feel like we matter. And so I came home, I was reunited with my family, I identified my kidnapper, and I then was like the first 3-year-old witness in a court case. And they did what wasn't called then a forensic interview. That's what it's called now. And I was behind. The prosecutor and the defense attorney were behind a 2-way mirror, and they were asking questions of the psychiatrist that was in the room with me, who is a phenomenal English psychiatrist, and his business partner and boss at the time, whose name was Dr. Richard Krugman, helped me put my kidnapper behind bars. And so fast forward till 15 years, when I was 18 years old, I reconnected with Dr. Krugman. He was the dean at CU Med School. And Dr. Krugman and I just became dear friends. And in graduate school, I asked him to be my mentor. And he couldn't say no to me. And so then fast forward another 10 years, when he was retiring from being the dean, he asked if I would help him open an organization that does for child abuse what's been done for cancer and heart disease and diabetes and suicide and mental illness, where we're just talking about hard things, but really creating a sense of hope and possibility. And I can't say no to him. And so since neither of us can say no, we both said yes, and we jumped in, never having opened a national organization before, let alone a 501c3, let alone calling it a foundation and not having an endowment. But we've done some pretty amazing things in the last 5 years. And that's been just by the grace of connections and relationshiping and just being ourselves, as authentic and genuine as we can, but more specifically making safe space for the voices of people impacted by child abuse and neglect, not just survivors, but the families of, the spouses of, the parents of, the friends of, because it changes everything it touches. And it all matters. And collectively, we can all do something. And so, like Candace said, a couple years ago, we were introduced, and then last year we became best friends and or best colleagues. And it's just been an awesome time since then. And that's led to more friendships. And it's just, that's how it happens.
And here we're showing the website for EndCAN, the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. You can learn more by going to endcan.org, endcan.org. So tell us a little bit, Lori, in terms of, first of all, I don't want this to go without saying, in terms of what I noticed, what I take from your introduction and your kind of reflection, and as Candace knows, and other viewers will note, I feel like I'm kind of new to this space of being an advocate, of being a public speaker, if you will. I keep joking with Candace that even if no one watches these episodes, I've learned so much from talking with other male survivors about some of the themes that we'll be talking about later today. But what strikes me is your ability to tell your story. Just, it is what it is. It doesn't stop you. It doesn't, you don't like, nothing caught in your voice. I didn't hear any kind of hesitation. What does it take to get to that point where you can just share? And Candace has done it as well, but I mean, I still, I've gotten a lot better. Candace knows I was a complete wreck. A complete wreck when we launched these episodes. What does it take to get to this point?
All right. So that is such a great question, because it is a huge part of the journey. And I laughed because, like, it really depends on the hour. And so, like, unfortunately for me, my story has been in the public eye since August 22nd, 1983. Yeah. And I never really had a choice as a child to, for it to be public or not. I didn't get to choose to come forward with my story or have like my own journey and my own process around coming out with it. And so I've always lived with it in a very public way. And also my abduction was so public that it impacted our whole community and the state, and then other states, and even there was international coverage. So it like changed people. And so I grew up, and even still, anytime somebody who remembers my story, it's not so much about my story, it's about what they were doing or what they went through or what they experienced during the 4 days that I was gone. And so it's their story also. So it's a very shared experience. And that's been a whole different journey in and of itself. And not most survivors aren't abused by strangers. Most survivors, whether it's physical, sexual, psychological, or emotional abuse, are abused by somebody they trust and somebody that they know and somebody that's supposed to keep them safe and protected. And so, and we know that the average age for a woman to come forward with her story is 52. And as a clinician and somebody who really tries to understand developmental impact and social psychology, that most women at that age, at least right now in our population, are have moved into that empty nesting phase. So their children are typically autonomized. So their children are usually between the ages of 21 and 25. And then all of a sudden, the pressure for the woman, for the mom or the female to have to also be mom and make sure their kids are safe and do all of that lessens. And then they can catch their breath and really reflect on their own experiences. Yeah. So therefore they come forward. Now, we do not have a statistic of the average age of men. And just since the Me Too movement, we have seen more men come forward than the history of mankind. Yeah. From college, Boy Scouts, and priests alone.
Yes.
We have just seen an influx, and I have goosebumps even thinking about it, because the pride and the gratitude and the hug that I have for each and every one of those voices is so insurmountable and so big, because our society hasn't been there. And these men are leaning into one another and coming forward and saying, this is not acceptable and not okay. And that is modeling for our junior men. It's modeling for our women. It's modeling for our peers. It's modeling for everybody how to do this and how to come forward. And the last thing I'll say is that some days talking about it is easy peasy. Like some days I am in a good place and I got this and I'm strong. And then the very next day, last Tuesday, I'm on a national meeting that I run. All these different leaders and CEOs and these badass people are on with me. And I just am stumbling and I just start crying. And I'm like, guys, I am struggling today. It was my anniversary of my kidnapping and I was just a mess. And I thought I had it. I thought I was good and I wasn't good. And so no matter how far away from it you get and how nice and sunny of a day it is, we just don't know when it hurts. Sure. And what's really cool is that, at least in my life now, I'm surrounded by the Candaces and all of these other badass people that if I cry or if I stumble, first they let it be my experience and they let me be there. And then second, they love me and they love on me and they help me to see that I'm okay and it's okay to be exactly where I'm at. And that feels really safe. And I don't know that I've really ever had that consistency of an environment around me. So
thank you.
My long answer.
No, but that really does help. And, as folks know, and as I've mentioned, you talked about the idea that most abuse occurs from someone you know. That's the case for Candace and I. Yeah. Candace, I'm just going to share quickly. Mm-hmm. I was abused by a neighbor when I was 7 years old. He knocked on my door, said he needed help with a Cub Scout project. And I said, sure. And he came in the house and he proceeded to abuse me in a downstairs room. And I had no idea what was going on. And the only reason it came out is because we left a light on in that room. And my dad came home and said, why'd you leave the light on in my office? And I explained to him, oh, well, so-and-so came over and we did this, and then he did this. And then we did, I could have been describing Matchbox cars. Like it really, there was no context for that. Yeah. It's It's something that is still, the stories that we've heard so far this year, has that whole range. The men that we've been able to hear from have had different experiences, different responses, whether it's a family member, whether it's a priest, whether it's a stranger. It's so powerful to hear these stories and to hear some people. And then there's also the range of where people are coming from. Some
Yeah.
people are sharing it for the very first time in a public setting,
Yeah.
and some people have given TED Talks, right?
Right.
Like some people have
Right.
written books about it. It's the full range
Yeah.
of experience. I want to, before we move on, I do want to bring in a comment. First of all, and this is one of the things that we can do with the live show that we don't get to do, Candace.
Yep.
One of our loyal viewers is watching, my mom.
Yay, Mom. Hi,
Thank
Mom.
you, Mom, for all of your support. And I will. I didn't think this would happen. First of all, her comment is congratulations for starting EndCAN, and very touching presentation. But what I wanted to mention is that before we launched the podcast, and I came out with a blog post in January to announce it, because I effectively came out with my story. I had shared it in a few spaces, but not as publicly as this. And I had to. My mom knew about what had happened, and she knew I'd shared it once before, and we had talked about it. But I had a long talk with her back in January, and this is hitting a little bit differently because every month she's seeing me talk about this topic, about this issue. This is something that happened to her son. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I don't know how I would deal with it if the roles were reversed. And she has watched every episode, commented on every piece, thanked Candace, thanked me, thanked our guests.
Wow.
And I know that sometimes as any family, there's always sometimes conflict, or sometimes we don't always see eye to eye. But I just want to thank her for her support in this process. And Candace, she had some praise for you as well, saying that you're doing a marvelous job uncovering a lot of truth that has been swept under the rug, these unspoken conversations, these taboo topics, encouraging others to voice their experience. And she's proud of us. And this is what happens with a live show, Candace.
Yep.
Sometimes things happen.
Neil, this
you
is
get to be
exactly
real.
what. Yes,
This is it. You get to be
this is-
real.
Yes, this is what
doesn't-
healing is, right?
It's sometimes we get emotional during an interview, and something might trigger something, but every now and then it's a comment or something you want to share that keeps it real.
If I may, I just
Please.
want to thank you for sharing that, and and thank your mom for that love, that unconditional positive regard, because I've never ever met a human. First of all, I've never met a baby who is evil. Second of all, I've never met a 5-year-old who's like, when I grow up, I'm going to abuse kids. And third of all, I've never met a human that doesn't want to matter. And when our families can put aside their own sadness or their own shame or their own guilt or whatever they're going through, and just show up for you like that, I mean, that is, it creates, interestingly, a little bit of envy within me. I've longed for that since I was found, and my abuse turned in a very awful way into my family system, just because of the impact of this. And I just think that's so beautiful that your mom is showing up like that. And what an example of what every survivor needs.
Yeah.
So way to go. Is it Suda? Is that how you say it?
Suda, yeah. Suda.
Suda. Way to go, Suda.
Aw.
I also want to acknowledge a friend of mine, a colleague at Digimentors, Apollo, saying he's glad to be here to support me and our guests. And he's watched several episodes and commented on Twitter about the work that we're doing. My mom is pulling out her psychotherapist card and saying that it's good to express feelings and get it off our chest. Thank you.
Here,
Thank you,
here,
Mom.
sister.
Yes. High fives everywhere.
This is a process, and there's a lot behind this. So what I'd like to do as I try and regain control of
It's okay, Neil.
my senses, Candace, I like to try
I know.
and maintain some bit of control, especially when I'm producing as well.
Well, and that's really common for a survivor, right? Like we have to manage our environment.
That's the transition to our first guest. So our first guest was Kenneth Rogers Jr. And I certainly encourage folks to rewatch or re-listen to that episode. But Lori, what we'll find, we're going to listen to a clip in just a moment, but the segue couldn't have been better. He has written several books about the impact of abuse, but using superheroes to tell the story, which is really incredible. I'm going to pull up his page right now, if I can get to it. Give me 1 second, because I want to do this, give him justice. LostImaginations.com is his website. So let's take a look at that real quick, and then we'll play his clip. There we go. And that's what we can do with this platform. So he has written several books using superheroes to tell the story about the impact of abuse on survivors, using the Green Lantern, using some of the others, the Inner Flash, how to slow your inner flash, a guide for survivors of childhood sexual abuse using the Flash to help conquer workaholism, how to save your inner Wonder Woman, a guide to help caregivers and allies of survivors of childhood sexual abuse using.
They're all great books. Right? I read them all, Lori.
It's all incredible.
Oh my goodness. I took so many notes and things that just resonated with me. It was amazing.
Imposter syndrome, right?
Workaholism.
Everything.
So
what you just said, and that's one thing that I learned in this process, like some of these issues that I deal with on a regular basis. Oh, really? That's a real thing that really comes up. I want to bring in Apollo again because it's a live show. Want to bring in what he's saying. Well, he finds that abuse is more prevalent than we recognize. Nobody is safe. That doesn't diminish anyone else's pain, just makes clear that there's a battle against normalization of sexual abuse, especially for children. So thank you, Apollo. So with that, let's play the clip from our interview with Kenneth, and then we'll reflect on that.
So for you, like that whole, the healing journey or that trigger of mental health. And I mentioned, you said that you had a heart attack at 30.
Oh, yeah.
And so I know that kind of like spawned. So I didn't know if it was your daughter being born, your child being born, that then you went, you really need to get help, like that whole mental health, that journey. Because it takes a survivor, I feel, to get to that point that I really need professional help, right?
I forgot about that. I need to mention that part. Yeah.
That's okay.
It's a lot in there. So I, like, for years, my wife was telling me, like, you need to see a therapist. You need to see a therapist. You need to see a therapist. And I was with the mentality, no, I'm strong. I don't need to do that. That's for weak people. Weak people need to go see therapists or talk about their feelings. Instead, I would spend hours in the gym. I was an avid runner. I still like to run, but I would run 5-6 miles a day, on top of like working to just go numb, to just like get rid of all those emotions and those feelings, until it just didn't really work anymore. I would run, but I would still just feel extremely horrible and crappy. But when I started feeling extremely depressed and anxious, and thoughts of suicide, I called the hospital and said, I'm really thinking about suicide. And they were like, we're going to send an ambulance over. And I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Don't send an ambulance over, because I was stupid. But my friend Sully, they asked me, like, do you have anyone who you can call? Like, who's like a, I don't know, police officer or firefighter. Sully was a police officer or a firefighter. And he came over, he picked me up, he took me to the hospital. And while we were there, they gave me a list of different therapists that I can call. It wasn't really anything there that really did anything, because it wasn't really that useful. But doing that and realizing, like, this is not getting any better, I called in order to get an appointment, which I was able to, and then get some medication for anti-anxiety, and then hook up with a therapist and talk with them. And so that was really the starting point.
That was Kenneth Rogers talking about the importance of mental health. Lori, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on hearing that clip.
Yeah. First of all, I feel like I have a new book series that I need to read. And I also love embedding the hero in it. I think as survivors, and oftentimes a very strong coping skill of survivors is to become perfectionists. It's like anything we can do to control our environment, we will do, whether it's our hair color or the cleanliness of things or being the boss or whatever that looks like. And we also tend to do all of those external things that can quickly allow us to forget about the internal things or lose connection with that internal thing. And the internal thing is our own body and our own feelings and our own experiences. And as he described, he knew something was wrong and the severity of it felt very unfamiliar, but it sounds like, he had to bounce off bottom, instead of hitting rock bottom, he just bounced off bottom and thankfully had a support system in place that could lead him to his next door. Whether that hospital did anything or not, it seems like that was the bounce that was necessary to get him entered into the next phase of his own healing journey and connecting with that inner self, which is so hard for us to do, and why we lose so many survivors to suicide and severe mental illness because of unconversed and untapped into mental struggles that come from, early impacts.
Mm-hmm.
And Candace, you were the one that teed up that question for him.
Mm-hmm.
You've read his books, and the way that we organize this, you spent more time with all of our guests. I did a prep session with them and a little conversation. I think it's fortuitous that Kenneth was after my interview. Kenneth was our first guest to really set the tone for what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think what really hit me was when he talked about being a workaholic. That to me right there, and then he's like, you want to work so much so you don't think about the pain, or you don't think about the work that you really need to be doing. And that's what he kept ignoring it. I'm fine, I'm strong, I'm not weak. And so just that whole mindset of he didn't want to address it, or he just thought he could bury it and put it under the rug. And then he actually had a health, wanted to commit suicide, but then I think he had arm pain. He had suffered a heart attack, stroke. He was medically paralyzed. He had to go in for to get treated, and he was just like, this is enough, I need to listen, and take care of myself. And so he did. And again, him writing these books has been therapeutic for me, being able to read them and understand I wasn't alone in these feelings that I have. And I've given that caregiver's book to my family, my friends, my best friend, read this. This is so relevant to when we were parents and how we didn't maybe handle situations because we didn't address our trauma. And it's just all the connection to how you were, decisions you made, choices you made. Not that they were wrong or to go back and feel bad for the decisions, just that you're educating yourself. You're learning more about who you are, why you made those decisions. And so, yeah, Kenneth was an amazing guest. And when I meet with my guests, it's very intentional. Like I try to make sure like I learn more deep about their story so that when we have those conversations, like, hey, touch on this mental health because this is important about the journey. And I want those individuals listening, the listeners, the people watching, it's okay to not be okay, but it's just not okay to stay that way. There's help out there. And if you go for it, you can heal and shine your light, come out of the darkness. So
I'll just share one comment about our conversation with Kenneth and actually what was important to me just here's an example of someone who is further along in that journey, with a very well developed website and books and a lot of thinking around this. But when we recorded his episode and then when we aired it in February, we actually watched it together. Candace, Kenneth, and I. We were on the phone talking to each other as we were watching the recording, and he had wisdom, for me. And Candace, I don't know if you remember, but I was really, anxious about the fact that I hadn't done enough to promote the show, that I could have done more. I could have shared it in more places. I could have emailed more people and did more on social media. And I told that to both of them while we were talking. And Kenneth just took a moment and said, Neil, it's okay. Whoever needs to watch this will watch it. They'll find it. You're putting good content out in the world, and that's enough. And and that has carried me throughout this season, even into today. So I just really wanted to give Kenneth a big shout out for that, and how helpful, not just in the interview and in the podcast, but even afterward, continuing that process. I want to give a shout out to Scott Kinderman, who is watching. On
Scott.
Candace's
Hi,
Facebook page.
Scott.
He said sorry he was late, but he's here now.
That's okay.
And Candace, tell us just a little bit about Scott.
Scott Kinderman. So we're both on the board of directors for Belief Survivors Incorporated. That's a local organization here that has a sexual assault survivor program as well as a SCAN program. Scott is a male survivor. He was also on season 3. He was episode 0. He aired before Neil's episode where we kicked off the video series. But Scott will be back on this live series more at the end of the year. And his video will be released later in the year. But Scott is going to be at the walk that we're hosting here in the city of Milwaukee, Lori, and he is our male survivor guest speaker, and he is going to be awarded the Unspoken Hero Award. So I have 4 awards to give, 2 from last year, 2 from this year. Very proud as we, talking about Kenneth Heroes, right? So Columbus, Ohio has the Trudy Hero Award and the Junior Trudy Hero Award. And then I wanted to kind of create the Unspoken Award. So just very excited again for the work that Belief is doing here locally in Wisconsin. And then again, to also be partnered with Lori at the national level with EndCAN. So they're all tied and we're both doing this important work. And Scott and I will be on CBS 58 in a couple weeks here talking about EndCAN and talking about the walk. So stay tuned for more.
And you can learn more at beliefsurvivors.org.
Yes.
Beleaf, BELEAF, survivors.org.
Lori, you had a question?
I was just correct me if I'm wrong. Belief got a grant also from participating in the walk last year,
yes.
Right?
They were part of our Together Pavilion. They applied for the grant. So, as I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about the walk, but the walk allows us to create, funding. The dollars we raise come right back to the communities that we serve. And so if Belief was part of our Together Pavilion, they were able to apply for a grant and they submitted their information and they were awarded. So yes, Believe has used their grants. They were awarded $7,500 last year, and they used that for their SCAN program, which SCAN is Stop Child Abuse and Neglect. So they went into the Racine and Kenosha school districts, did a lot of education, prevention, all the way, I think, from 6th grade to middle school. So they have been doing the important work.
So let's take a moment to talk about some of the walks that are coming up,
Sure.
Candace.
Yeah, Lori, I'm going to give you the floor.
Yes. Okay, sure. I mean, you're the one. I mean,
so we're hosting a walk, in the city of Milwaukee. But Lori, why don't you just talk about the walks, the importance of the walks, and then we'll talk about the 3 cities.
Yeah, so at EndCAN, we have really talked about how do we it's like the way that I look at it is like we are an hourglass. So we recognize we have to start from the bottom up and then the top down. So in addition to going to policymakers and working on working with other national and international organizations and comorbid partners of organizations that have the same audience as child abuse and neglect does, we've really focused a lot on building grassroots efforts. And those grassroots efforts started with us having these walks across the country. And they are so much fun. Just coming to a walk, like you would think, oh, it's going to be really sad and we're going to hear all these awful things. And, you know, like, oh, it's just too hard. I can't. And I haven't been to a walk where I'm like, ooh, that was like never once. Instead, I'm like, yeah, there's bubbles, like bubbles, balloons, music, dancing, laughing, just energy. And we are surrounded, and there is no person there that you can look at and be like, oh, that's a survivor. Oh, that person's a survivor. Oh, there's a survivor. Because for us, it's not about any survivor coming to the front of the stage and saying, I'm a survivor. Unless they want to, they're welcome to do that. But the concept of the walk is that we are in this together, and we don't at all just call out or want to differentiate, because we don't know who among us are survivors and who are ready and who are willing. You know, it's just a safe, joyful, happy, optimistic place to introduce hope and possibility. And we raise a lot of awareness, a lot of dollars, and it only happens because we have amazing people on the ground in those cities. You know your communities, you know your cities. We at EndCAN are here to fan that flame, and our biggest goal is reach. You know, we just want to have the largest impact at the lowest possible negative impact, or I guess like imprint. That's it. And more of that. We just want the ROI to be, you know, exponential. Sure. And so Candace is our walk lead in Milwaukee, and we have a walk in Ohio. We had a walk for 2 years in Dallas, and this year we have one again in Denver. Next year we have 5 walk cities that want to join in. I just got home yesterday from touring 2 places in California with walk leads. I'm just super stoked about how all this is spreading and people are coming together. It's so much fun.
It is. It's going to be a great time.
You can learn more about EndCAN's walks at endcan.org/walk together. And that's the website that's scrolling across the bottom. endcan.org/walk together. We should also note that if you are not in one of those cities, you can support these walks by clicking on the donate button on that page. You can go there, endcan.org/walk together, #donate, or just click on the yellow donate button. And that'll help make a difference for folks. The idea of ending child abuse is
a no-brainer.
A no-brainer, a worthy goal if there ever was one.
Yes, and we can do it.
And I've never met anybody against ending child abuse, ever.
Ever.
So, and if there is anybody against it, you know, let's talk.
Yes.
So with that, let's go ahead and talk about our next segment that we want to review. And this is another a guest that I have a lot of thoughts about because of the role he plays and kind of where he is in his journey. Nathan Spiteri is, I was mentioning earlier, in terms of the range of speakers, he has given a TED Talk about his experience. He has done TV interviews, as you can see from his website. His website is nathanspiteri.com, and I'll share that at the bottom of the screen as well. So if you want to learn more about Nathan's story, you can do that. And you can also see a memoir that he wrote, Toy Cars, which is this graphic on the left. He is himself a actor, an advocate, a filmmaker, and is really, I would say, of all the, not all the folks we've spoken to, Candace, but one of the most advanced in terms of how much media he's done and how well developed he is in terms of his advocacy work.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and hear from Nathan, and hear a little bit of our conversation with him.
You said you were able to forgive your attacker, your rapist. Is that the key?
That's a.
I'm asking for a friend. I mean,
all right. Tell your friend. Yeah, it's a big part of it.
Me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big part of it, because for me, if I didn't forgive or go to some way to forgive this man, I would still have so much anger and hatred inside of me. And I don't have that anymore. I'm able to move forward and be at peace with what happened to me. Mind you, my attacker's dead. And he died before I came out about what happened to me. So I never got a chance to speak with him, or I would love to. If I had the opportunity, I would love to sit with him, speak with him, ask him why, ask it if it happened to him. Forgive him, but then also, and I've always said this, I'd take a baseball bat and I'd kill him. Not because of what he did to me, just so he couldn't do it to another kid. Whether that's right or wrong. But in order to forgive, in order to move forward, forgiveness was a massive part of it. Also, I wrote him a letter. And that's a big part of it. Write a letter to your abuser, telling him how you feel, telling him that he doesn't own you anymore, telling him that he doesn't have the power over you anymore, and do what you want with it. Take the letter to your grave, give it to a loved one, burn it, which is what I did. Keep it on you forever so you can see how far you've come. And then, yeah, do what you want with it.
Powerful stuff. And that was me asking for a friend, me. This is one of the things that I've had a very difficult time dealing with, this idea of forgiveness. Lori, I'm gonna put you on the spot again, and
Yeah.
How has how's that played out for you with your story? For folks who may have joined us late, Lori shared with us she was kidnapped when you were 3, I think. You said 37 months old, and abused, raped, and left at the bottom of a latrine at a campsite, and was found 4 days later. I hesitate to even ask the question, Lori. Have you been able to forgive the person who did this to you?
I was afraid you were going to ask that question, and I'm not afraid because it's worthy.
I hate even asking it. I can't even,
No. Oh my gosh, no, not at all. It's worthy of discussion, and I've been asked that question on Dr. Oz, on the Today Show, on Lifetime. Like, that is the question that everybody wants to know: is have you forgiven? And the reality, Neil, is that up until this last 6 months, and not that I forgave him for his actions. I forgave him because I needed to release that. And I had forgiven him early. When I was about 8, I remember deciding I was going to be like David Jones, who was the psychiatrist that treated me. And that I knew that there was a brokenness on the impacts that this topic has on everything it touches. So not just me, but my family and my community and our friends and all of it. So early on, I was like, there's a reason this man did this. There's a reason. And it's kind of like somebody breaking into my car, and I don't mean it this flippantly, but I'm like, hey, take it, don't break my windows, just take it, right? And so I knew at a very, very young age that I had to do something with my experience, that this happened to me not so that I could go be a mortgage broker. This happened to me so that, because I have a strength in me and I have a willingness in me to address the pain and to recognize the constant attention that it will always need in my relationships and my parenting and my own healing, all of it. And so all of these years, I have lived in forgiveness and even in compassion, simply because all of these years, I knew that my abductor was also a survivor. And had somebody done for him what was done for me, maybe he wouldn't have hurt me. And then in the last 6 months, in the last 12 months, I have had 5 other people who he has abused come forward and find me and tell me what he did to them, what he's done to them, that he's reoffended, that he's gone back to jail for not registering, that right now he's registered as an address unknown. And so my anger has returned. Well, I guess I never really had anger. My anger is new. And that's a lot to deal with, because I want to confront him, and I want to confront his wife at the time, who I recently learned knew all of the things he did to children, including me. And that woman, I don't even know her name, let alone where she is or what charges she got, because she didn't get any. And it's just, it makes me mad that our priority is not protecting our children, and instead it makes me mad. And so I'm no longer in forgiveness, and I'm sure my body's going to get mad at me in a couple months for that, but I'll listen to it when it does. But right now I am allowed to be mad, and I'm allowed to be mad at the people in my life that have hurt me because of their own hurts, because that's exactly what we shouldn't do. And it's hurt people hurt others. And if you don't like how somebody is treating you, do exactly what you need them to do. So you be the change that you want to see in the world. And
quoting Gandhi.
Yeah.
If nothing else, Candace, what I'm taking away from that is, forgiveness is not a straight line. It is a meandering journey. I haven't quite started that journey yet myself, but I do want to bring in Scott, sharing that forgiveness is a very intense subject to process.
Yes, it is.
And I know, Candace, you have also worked through this, and part of again, the learning that I've taken from this process and this journey, I've learned from you as much as I have from anyone else that we've met with, Candace, and now I get to learn from 2 very strong women, and that's important, I think, to note, because I think part of what we're doing with this, Candace, is breaking down this idea that abuse and survivorship is that one gender has monopoly on this, that it's something that usually women are the focus of conversations around survivorship. This year has been dedicated to men, but it's not just men. It's just not just women. We all are learning from each other.
Yep.
And it really is a powerful process.
Yeah, I'll just say I re-listened to the episode with Nathan, and it hit me. So I listen to every episode because I'm very critical, of course, of myself. I want to be better a host. So when I listened to it, and I visually, when I talked about how I got I'm sorry from my abuser, he said he was sorry, and I did forgive him. So I don't know how many survivors get that, but I did receive that. But that was the hardest thing, right? To allow this man in my house. I remember backing up, but when I heard myself tell the story, I could visualize the house. I could visualize the smell. I could smell the senses when he walked in the room. Like everything came back to me, which I literally like got emotional just listening to myself and hearing that. It's like it was a trigger for me. And then I'm working on reporting. I want to report because to Lori's fact, right? They're going to continue to offend. And if I don't do that part, so I'm processing that. So if this journey has taught me anything, it has taught me the importance to report. I never reported because of the fear that was instilled upon me, what could happen to me or my mother. And so now I'm going to report and I want it documented. Am I trying to pursue legal act? No, because I've passed the statute of whatever. But I just want it so that for the next person, hopefully, God willing, it's not anyone. But if I don't do that, I need to. I've stepped into this role. I need to also step into the next role, which is taking that legal reporting factor and see what happens. And then the other thing I'd like to mention is, I carry this man's last name, and even entertaining the possibility of what that would look like to change my name, right? So again, I'm still processing. I'm now 53 years old and really digging deep into this continual healing journey. So yeah, just wanted to share that. But forgive yourself first. It wasn't your fault. Bottom line.
That's something that we've talked about throughout this year, Candace. This idea of forgiving yourself before you can go into that journey.
Yes.
I do want to acknowledge Amy's comment, Amy Farnan, watching on LinkedIn, such strong and inspirational women, I couldn't agree more. This all came about because Candace heard me on a panel speaking of other male survivors, asking women in the audience to make space for men in this conversation about survivors, about saying I was pleading with people, saying that we men are often overlooked in these conversations. We'll need a little help to get our story out. But where you can, please include us in panels. Please make space so we can tell our own stories. And before that conversation was over, Candace was already emailing me and chatting me in the Zoom saying, let's figure out how to make this work.
That's what she does, man.
Funny story. So Neil, I tell this story. So I work remote from home, right? And the beauty of working remote is the meeting got canceled, and I really wanted to attend this male survivor, panel discussion. I didn't know who was going to be on the call. I just knew I was invited through some of my advocacy groups. So it's really important to me. But again, I believe that by the grace of God, divine design, the stars aligned for me, and I attended. And then honestly, like a week before that, I had recorded Scott already, him and his daughter Scarlett. He was a male survivor. I already recorded him. And so we kind of had the seed planted, right? About, hey, wait, maybe we could do a co-host. So we had kind of talked about it. And I was wondering in my own head, how many more episodes can I continue to do? Am I going to still have these guests still show up? Are people still going to want to tell their stories? Because, you kind of, again, you start to criticize yourself, or is this really worth it? Am I really making an impact? Judging yourself constantly, are you making change happen? And then Neil, hearing you and then that call of action, I was like, this is exactly why I was supposed to be here, because I was like, you know what? I'm looking for my next season. Season 3, boom, dedicated to all male survivors. And here we are.
It was incredible.
Meant to be.
Absolutely incredible. As a reminder for folks, this is a special live presentation of our season 3 Unspoken Conversations with Candace. My name is Neil Parekh, and I'm a co-host for this season with Candace. I myself am a survivor. Candace and Lori, of course, are survivors as well. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and my website. You'll be able, if you joined us late, you'll be able to watch the episode in its entirety from the beginning, just a few minutes after we're off the air. We do have one more segment that we want to cover, so we're not going to end it just yet. We're just after 8 o'clock. With your indulgence, we're going to go till about 8:20, maybe not longer than 8:30 if I can keep it under wraps. But I just want to give people a heads up. This has been such a great conversation, and we're getting some great comments for folks who are watching. So keep your comments coming. Let us know where you're watching from, and we will put your comments on the screen. So with that, and continuing in this theme of forgiveness, I want to bring in one more guest, Callen Harty, and let him share a little bit about his story. Here's our little clip from our interview with Callen. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to? I mean, a lot of the focus is on forgiving the abuser, but I mean, where are you with forgiving? I mean, Candace, you talked about forgiving your mom, um, forgiving your moms, forgiving yourselves. I mean, is that the last step in the process? Is that the first step in the process?
I'd say it's a step in the process. I think the process is different for each person who goes down this road. And I've never held that against my mother. I knew that it affected me in that way, but I also understood that generational thing, and that she had no clue that what she said was hurtful. She was just trying to parent as well as she could with no guidebook, really. So I had forgiven my mother a long time ago. For me, forgiving myself was probably the hard part, because you do tend to blame yourself. You think it's your fault. You think that you're the one who caused it. You wonder if who you are is what made them do it. And I don't, this hasn't come up yet, but I'm gay. And, one of the things that I had mentioned to you, Neil, prior to this, is one of the things that I learned in my coming out about this abuse was that I am not gay because I was abused, and I was not abused because I'm gay. But a lot of people, especially male survivors who are straight, question, what does this mean? Does this make me gay? What's going on? So there's always this self-blame that comes along with that. I think that's if not 100%, pretty universal feeling with survivors.
So that is exactly what we were talking about, that idea of forgiving yourself. I want to bring in a comment that came in earlier, and this is I think the right time to share it for folks who are watching earlier. I shared my story of having been abused in my own home, in a downstairs room. My mom is watching. She's still watching. And what she had shared earlier, I want to put that comment on the air now, that when this incident took place, she was working. She was at the hospital. She's a psychotherapist. She is a retired psychotherapist. My dad was a lawyer. He was out, and our nanny was upstairs. And she said she still feels bad that she should have been there for me. And I think that that's one of the things that's brings it all home. That idea of being able to forgive the people around us, forgive our loved ones. It's almost easier, I think, to forgive family, to forgive your mom, to forgive even others who have forgiven their abusers. I think, at least in my estimation, it's the last domino is forgiving yourself. Lori, you talked about kind of your meandering road to forgiveness, and where you're not, you had been in a forgiving place earlier, and then when you heard more, it put it in a different light. Callen talked about this question, and Candace had talked about this as well, about forgiving the other people in your life that were involved, in the periphery, not necessarily responsible, but who are also part of the story.
Yeah, I think I feel like there's just these different phases that I've gone through. When I was a small child, like my family's goal was for me to be normal. And because within 6 to 12 months after my abduction, I either stopped talking about it or I had completely just moved on from it and forgotten it, that there was this belief that I didn't remember it. So therefore it didn't impact me. And therefore it was over and we were fine. And I don't think anybody can go through something like this and be fine. I think it's abnormal. I think it's something that it changes your DNA. As a therapist myself, I've seen actual brain scans of people's brains having changed after experiencing trauma and child abuse. So I think it's about educating and informing and being compassionate and also patient. Every parent I've ever known has this fear of having done something wrong. And one of my favorite lines on Ted Lasso was when his mother said, we have a lot of losses and we have a lot of wins, and you just kind of hope for a tie. And I think that as parents, it's our duty and our responsibility to raise these humans, and we all mess it up. And all of us turn back to our parents and blame them, not because we mean to, but because who else are you gonna, It's just that's just the normal thing. And then you add child abuse into it, and I think every parent can empathize or understand or even come close to recognizing, like, I've had really bad parenting moments. Does that make me a horrible parent? And just like abusers, hopefully many of them had a really bad moment and they recognized it and did something different. But there's kind of this softness of acceptance that I think with that shame and that guilt and that blame and the forgiveness, and it's like a giant stew, and you don't know, at the end of the day, you don't know what's beef and what's, broth and what's tomato. Like, it just all folds together, and we're just doing the very best we can to figure out the next step and to do the next right thing.
I do want to make a note in terms of Callen, another of our guests who's an advocate, who's an author, who's shared his story. What struck me the most, Candace, is the play that Callen had written, and this really just is powerful to think about. These are some shots from the set where in his play it's a dialogue between his older self and his younger self, and what he wishes he could tell them. And Lori, this can play out at any point in our lives. And Candace, sending a note. Nathan talked about the idea of writing a letter to forgive your abuser, the person who assaulted you, and even if you don't deliver it, if you destroy the letter, but this idea of writing a letter to yourself, pick an age, the day after it happened, a couple of years afterward, as you're processing it. Again, something that we really, just so much wisdom that we've gotten from our guests, not just on these themes of abuse, on forgiveness and guilt, but also on being able to talk to each other and kind of help each other through this. Just very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, part of the EndCAN, when we think about their mission and vision, and Lori, there's a lot of sayings that EndCAN has, right? Together we're stronger. We're louder than silence. Those are some of the slogans, right? And I believe that. I hear it. I say it out loud, and I tell other survivors that, and it means something to them, that they're not alone, that they matter, that we see them, we hear them, we believe them, and those are all the words that, like, I just started to really learn how the power of those words and what they mean to a survivor when you tell them those things. And then when you do the inner child work, when you really, like, I had to write a letter to my younger self for the Hope Shining Blue event that happened this
Yeah,
past year.
you
And let
did.
me tell you, that was the toughest thing, and it was due in 14 days. And so I had to, like, and it took me 3 years to write my book. So you're trying to have me write this letter to my younger self. And I remember crying, and I was depressed again. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And this is too much work. And why do I got to revisit this pain? Can't they just read my book? But it was so therapeutic, is when you can really tell your younger self that it wasn't their fault, that, you know, who they're going to end up becoming, and just what they got to look forward to. And when I really got to see the end result and celebrate myself as a survivor, hey, Candace knows how to party. So it was like I was going to take my life in the good, the bad, and celebrate who I've become, because you are so much more than what's happened to you. And I'm just so grateful. So yeah,
You-
there's the Hope Shining Blue
You
fun.
mentioned the Hope Shining Blue event. I was so thrilled to be there at that event. These are pictures of all of the survivors who walked the runway that evening. But I want to share some of these pictures, and if you highlights from the runway. But these are my favorite. Candace
Seriously, look at
just
her.
walking the
girl.
runway,
She owns it. Yes.
owning it.
Look at that face.
Powerful,
Oh my.
powerful stuff.
It was
That's
such a
the
good
cover
time.
for your next book, Candace.
Yes,
Right there.
There you go.
it was just incredible, and
Oh.
I just loved every moment of it. So I wanted to share that with folks.
And thanks to
We
EndCAN, because I had a table for Unspoken conversation with
and
Candace. The male
yes,
survivors sat at the table, and EndCAN, the National Foundation and Child Abuse and Neglect, Lori, we had people representing the National Foundation. I had my committee sitting there. So, you know, we were well represented. And what a celebration it was, you know, to honor all of us, those that are still living in silence, but to see that celebration and to know again that they're not alone was an
and
amazing event.
Scott says you should have seen her dance, and absolutely, it was incredible. I do also want to share that Scott put out earlier. He is actually going to be sharing on his YouTube channel his own in-depth reflections on forgiveness. You can find his YouTube channel at Giving Voice Gaining Power. If you go to youtube.com, again, it's at Giving Voice Gaining Power. And Scott will be a guest on our show later in the year. And we look forward to having that conversation with him. We already know some of the topics we'll be covering with him. Before we close, Lori, we do want to talk a little bit more about EndCAN. We talked about the walks earlier. Tell us, more than just the walks. Tell us a little bit about the advocacy work that EndCAN does, and I'll show the website as well.
Yeah. So we have 4 pillars. Our 4 pillars are prevention, education and training, research, and advocacy. And as often as possible, every single thing that we do needs to touch at least 2, if not 3 of those 4 pillars. And so our advocacy is, I feel like, our biggest umbrella, because it's not just advocacy as in terms of policy change and changing laws and doing lobbying and going to the Hill. Because first, that takes millions and millions of dollars, and this field doesn't have that. And second, it takes the focus is advocating and us being our own version of advocates. And so our walks are a way of doing that. Our podcast is a way of doing that. Our survivor friends are a way of doing that. We have a place on our website where survivors can come and share their stories. We have an anonymous support group for people who are impacted by abuse and neglect, which is another form of advocacy. It does not require any of us to share at all. We welcome that anonymity that everybody needs. And so anything we can do is advocating. And even just this in and of itself, this is education, this is training, this is prevention, and this is advocacy. Like, I see this right here, this last hour and however many minutes we've been together, as just such a gift for me to be able to continue to do this work with fellow survivors, but also non-survivors that are watching and advocating with us, because hopefully to them, it's just lit a little, curious thought. And if that curious thought leads to conversation or leads to awareness or compassion in their next experience or their next exposure, we have done our jobs. And that is all it takes. And it's so exciting to me. And I've been in this field for 24 years. And just in the last 6 years, I have seen that our culture is ready. It's unavoidable. We are coming, and we are coming with fierce love and tenderness. And it is just like, I have goosebumps again thinking about it, because it's on, and the time is now. It's so exciting. And I want to thank all of the gymnastics survivors and the Me Too movement survivors that all came together, because for me, those are the people that I think kind of started all these little brush fires, and it's up to us to take those and fan them so they can turn into massive flames to do some serious change and reconstruction. So I'm excited.
On a separate interview show that we do, that I produce on Sunday mornings, I was able to interview Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who oversaw the case and gave the girls a chance to speak, and then sentence that man. I refuse to say his name on shows. We also had Abigail Pesta, who has written about many of these stories. And of course, Candace, our mutual friend, Dawn Helmrich, who brought Denim Day to Milwaukee. She's the one that got me on this journey of sharing my story. And I've had the chance to interview her twice. I wanted to make sure you knew, Lori, that every episode we have shared this slide about EndCAN and talked about EndCAN, and we've shared the website so people can learn more, highlighting the walks in Denver, Milwaukee, and Columbus for this year. So EndCAN has been a part of our show, a part of our season throughout the whole year, and will continue to be an important part of this process. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Likewise.
My mom has a comment of thank you. Very good interactive show. Even though this is a terrible experience that we're sharing, our goal, our hope, and we've said this throughout the season, if we're hoping that if people hear this story, if they hear a portion of someone's story, that it might give them some comfort. It might give them a little bit of strength to share their own story when they're ready. It is, people will hear it and internalize it, and it'll make a difference when it's the right time. And we have to just hope that that's the case. Apollo also kind of added to that list that you were sharing, Lori, the Ohio wrestlers who are trying to prosecute or document those stories, and others abused by doctors, Boy Scouts. The list is unfortunately very, very long.
But what's amazing is that people are coming out and people are saying, wait a minute, stop. Yes. That's amazing, because now we're putting protection and protocols and laws and policies and supports and accountability in place for our children. And that is prevention. And prevention happens on the whole lifespan until we reach a new generation of people who are not survivors and are learners from our histories and from our lessons and from our voices. So I just think, I thank all of these people for coming forward, because it's time. There
are two last things I'd like to share, Candace, before we close the show. First, I want to, make it a point to thank Sri Srinivasan, our co-founder of Digimentors, our CEO, and Candace thanks Digimentors in the opening. But I'd like to take a moment, when I first brought the idea of producing these shows on a pro bono basis, Sri and my colleagues didn't hesitate. And they know, and Candace knows that there's time and effort that goes into putting this together, not just in terms of the show itself, but the prep work and the technical side, etc. So I really just want to thank Sri and the rest of my colleagues for giving me the time to do this and kind of letting us support this podcast. And I think that, from our website, we create impact. We've certainly created some impact over the last several months, and will continue to do so. As the obligatory plug, you can learn more about Digimentors at digimentors.group, digimentors.group. But I think that we will close, Candace, with a proper, not that you would want me to do this, but I am going to close with sharing your website, and make sure that folks know that all of this is based on and built on the work that Candace has done for the last several years as an author, life coach, motivational speaker, and podcast host. And in addition to these episodes and the podcast, you can find her shop, other publications, and ways to contact her on CandaceSanchez.com. So I want to leave folks with that. Incredible, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
And I think what's also really beautiful is that Candace has taken something that is so horrific and so unspoken and gross and similar to compost and manure, and put water on it and put a few seeds in there, and this right here is the outcome. And that is so cool, that even shit can make beautiful things.
That's right.
Shit make beautiful things. I don't think I'd heard that before. That is incredible. That is incredible.
Quote of
I
the
love
day.
it.
Well,
I
they
love
put
it.
like, what do? They put manure to make things grow. Like, hey, it
Totally.
happens, right?
That's it.
Worth a ticker at the bottom.
Worth a ticker at the bottom.
People missed it. For those in the back row,
We gotta have fun.
Even
We gotta have
shit.
fun on the show, right?
even
Gotta have
shit
humor.
can make beautiful things.
That's awesome.
I want to bring in Apollo's comment. This has been an empowering experience. Thank you all. Thank you, Apollo, for your support. And he offered his own version of this. The lotus rises from the mud.
So
That's
much better.
But I liked yours, Lori. Yours is good. Yours
So
was good.
we'll end on the one that I know Lori has on her bookmarks, which she has a nice bookmark for her books, and I keep this in my book and it's in her book. But she says it's a Helen Keller quote. So we'll end with this beautiful quote, and it says, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And that's the true meaning here, with all the work and all the effort that we're doing collectively in our own spaces, but coming together to create community, change, celebrate the stories of survivors, and to show the strength, resiliency, and transformation that can happen truly from the inside out. So thank you, Lori. Thank you, Neil. Please make your donations to EndCAN Walk Together. Our series is coming up. If you are in Wisconsin, you want to help me reach my goal. We are almost there. Please help me reach my goal. We are trying to raise $15,000 here in the city of Milwaukee. We are at 9,400. So we're not that far. I always tell everybody, if you can ask 10 of your friends to each donate $10, that's $100. If you have 10 business partners and you can ask them $100 for some children, please do that. Every dollar matters. So please, please, please donate to the wonderful, amazing National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect it will make a great impact. And again, alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much by Helen Keller. So thank you, Neil.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
And stay tuned next month for another
Yep.
live episode of
Heck yeah.
Unspoken
Yes.
Conversations with Candace. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.